Oh, hello folks. Just having a sip of my tea there, like all good Englishmen. Welcome back to the channel, thank you for joining me. Doing a different short video today. Several of you have written comments and asked questions asking for my advice, and I promise you I am not the best person for giving hints and tips and techniques and all this kind of thing. I'm quite happy to share what I know if anybody has specific questions. And if I don't know the answer, I will just tell you I don't know, or I don't feel, confident about that particular thing. If it's something I'm perhaps haven't got experience of or never tried successfully, I won't steer you down the wrong road. And I'm not going to, although you see on the desk here, there's lots of products here that I'm currently using for various different applications. But I'm not going to recommend any one above another. I'm just going to say I use this, and this is the results I find at the moment. Because I think it's a bit of a minefield. I think this is what prompted some of the questions from people. A lady has asked me a question, a lady in the States, probably knows who she is. I won't name her, but she was asking about advice on rattle-can, so I'm going to talk about rattle-can. And I've had a gentleman asking me advice on, what was it now, for clear gloss varnishes, I'm not an expert in this field, but I'll share with you what I've done and what I know and what's worked for me. But it does depend on, I think, some of these issues that people have, including me. I think it depends on lots of things. I think it depends on your environment you're modelling in, the temperature, the altitude. I think can affect things like rattle-can. I think that can be affected by altitude. So if somebody with a maybe a rattle-can that lives up in Colorado, for argument's sake, or somewhere up in Scotland, they might be a couple of thousand feet above sea level. That could have an effect on the way that the rattle-can propellant, for example, behaves and things like that. So I'm going to talk about how I've got certain things to work and what the conditions were as best I recall, and what airbrush I'm using, all this kind of thing. But it doesn't mean it'll work for you. But by all means, I just thought I'd share my bit of knowledge, such as it is. And if you're having problems with any of these sort of applications, then you can have a go. Just try maybe one or two of the things I've done. It might work for you. It might solve your problem. It might not. But yeah, I don't want to be one of these. There are better modelers, and you can think even in the UK, we can think of lots of them who are much more experienced than me and much more skilled than me. But anyway, we won't let that bog us down. I'll show you one or two models here and how I achieve various effects, finishes and things, and I'll tell you also what went wrong with one or two of them, and problems I've had, etc., and perhaps things that are worth sharing. Anyway, without further ado, we'll crack on. So, first of all, where to begin? Well, the rattle-can thing. Let's start with that, because I was asked this question specifically, and I've got my favourites of Tamiya, I've got to be honest. Again, I'm not an expert on spraying, and if you're like me, it fills me with dread a little bit, rattle-can, because they're small, but they're deadly, aren't they? They just dump such a volume of paint down so fast, and so if you're not careful, so many things can go wrong. And I've got three here that I've actually used on the models that you see in front of you. So that one goes with this model, and then is Mclaren Honda, fluorescent red. It doesn't exactly match, but don't worry about that. I think it's just the way they did the top. Then we've got the red here for these two, and we've got the black here for the John Player Special Lotus. And I just want to talk about how I've found the best way of getting the rattle-can to work. First of all, I live in an area in sort of northwestern England, and it's fairly flat, only about 100 metres above sea level, if that. So bear that in mind. But when I use rattle-can, I read somewhere, or maybe I saw an article in a magazine, and people were talking about the there's a propellant in here and there's paint. And what you've got to do is you've got to have conditions that enable the propellant to deposit the paint in a way that will not create any kind of reactions. And what I'm talking about specifically in my mind anyway, and what I've experienced with these kits that I've built, especially actually with, well, actually all four of them, but with the Mclaren Honda with the orange red, and I don't think the colour's relevant, by the way, it's quite big, it's quite a lot of coverage. We've got to be very careful, because what will happen, and I did it on my Brabham fan car, I didn't do such a great job on that, if I'm honest. There are three things I think you need to avoid: dust, which is your number one enemy. You need to avoid cold, because these don't they don't atomize well in very cold environments. And when I say cold, I think we need to have a certain temperature in the air to make it work, and we need to have a certain temperature in the can to make it work as well. And then what I'm telling you is not gospel. Please don't say what you said. I can only tell you what works for me. But what I do with these is I actually put them in some hot water before I use them. So the first tip is stick it in a bucket or a big bowl or something of hot water that's not so hot that it's boiling, but hot enough that you put your fingers in and think, that's quite hot, So probably about 60 degrees, perhaps, something like that. And leave it in there for about 30 minutes and it will warm it up. So, in other words, I'm saying it needs to be probably warmer than room temperature. I reckon probably, I don't know if I ever tested this, but I reckon that these are probably best at about 40, 45 degrees, probably not more than 50. But warm, get the paint warm, have it physically warm. And if you have warmer weather, I find much better results. So again, I'm going to talk, sorry for you guys in the States, I'm going to talk in Celsius, centigrade here. Probably around about the 25 to 30 Celsius temperature is probably a good operating window for these paints. So get them, I would actually maybe get a little bit warmer than the air temperature, so maybe 40, 50 degrees, somewhere, not more than that, but between 40 and 50. I reckon probably 40 in my mind is a good temperature. And you want the air temperature about 25 to 30. Now what I did, when I sprayed this Mclaren Honda, it was in the depths of, it was New Year, it was freezing cold. So what I did is we have a room in the house which is like a utility room for the washing machines and things. It's only small. But what I did is I put newspaper up and taped it all to the walls to make sure there was not going to be any problems with my wife when she walked in and sees all this potential disaster zone. So I basically taped off everything that could have got spray on it and used cardboard everywhere and newspaper on anything sensitive, covered up all the washing machines and things like that. And I put the heating on high and I put it up to about, I think it was about 25, 30 degrees on the temperature, and left it for about 45 minutes to an hour. And this room warmed up, it's only a small room, so it soon warmed up. And I thought, you want it at a temperature where it's just a little bit too warm, or maybe like a summer's day warm, if you know what I mean. So it was probably about 26, 27 degrees-ish in this room. And I'd shut the room so there was no dust. We didn't have any doors opened or anything like that for about an hour. And then I got my fluorescent red and I went to work. And there's actually a photo somewhere, and I ought to dig it out for you. Really, perhaps I should have prepared it. But there is a photo of the aftermath of this operation where everything has got this fluorescent red on it, but it's okay because it's all been covered up. But it's on the walls. But luckily we've got newspaper to cover, and it was all over the place because this stuff does get everywhere. That's the other problem with it, actually. So sort your dust out, sort your environment out, sort your temperature out, and I think you'll find it a lot easier to use. And they also seem to work more efficiently and perhaps it doesn't come out quite as thick when it's a warm temperature in the air and a warm temperature in the can. So you want homogeneity, in other words, you want it all to be as similar as possible, I guess. So certainly 25 degrees plus, I think. But between 25 and 40-ish, I think, is the ideal conditions. And I sprayed this and I got fantastic results with it, to be honest. Much better than I expected with this one. But there is a downside to these sprays, and I should point this out and be open with you about it, because this is something that annoys me a little bit. They're not very light fast, these spray paints, I find. So you got your TS36, which is what we used here. Now, I don't know if this really picks up on the camera, so I'm going to bring you in a bit more. Yeah, I don't want to start moving stuff around, but I'll just zoom in a little bit so you can see it anyway in the bottom of the image. This model it's not near any light source and it's not near any windows. It's about 8 to 10 metres away from the nearest window, and there is no direct sunlight that falls on it at all. But over time I can see that the actual paint colour is changing. And the orange redness is shifting, it's colour shifting. So this is something to be aware of, and this is with the fluorescent colours in particular. And what it's doing, and you know, it's UV light, but it's not really UV light. This model has never been really in the sun. It's never been near windows. It's been kept in, you know, a very protected environment at the dark end of a long room. But it's starting to go a little bit pink. It's losing its red-orange and it's colour shifting toward the pink end of the spectrum, only slightly. But even looking at it here, it's more obvious on the top than it is on the sides. And I just think you have to be a little bit careful. If you're using fluorescent rattle cans, maybe, I don't know, I can't say, you know, experiment with it because you won't find out for a couple of years. But this is not untypical with some of these Tamiya rattle cans, just to be honest with you. Now, we'll just move away from the Mclaren. I obviously had to tidy up my wife's utility room before she divorced me, which took a few hours. But in the end, it did work. It did work. Now, when I sprayed the Brabham fan car, which I don't have in front of me, but you've probably seen it in other videos, that was not quite as successful. Now, I sprayed that actually here where I'm sitting pretty much. And this is basically a garage, I mean. Even though I keep it fairly clean, it's not dust free at all, and some dust did get into the process. Now what you need to do to avoid that really, and I think I did this with the Lotus, I certainly did it with the motorbike, is I sprayed the parts and then I covered them with, you know, like a bowl or maybe a washing up bowl or like a cake tin or something like that, something that's big enough to give clearance, but don't put it down flat, because if you just sprayed it you need some ventilation. It's got to dry, so you need to jack it up, but it stops the fallout dust, and that's what happened to the Brabham fan car. It's only tiny, and if I showed it you at this magnification you're seeing now, you can't see any faults at all. But if I zoom right in you can see it, and I think one of my videos I zoomed right in and you can just see this little hair, and I thought, and it's only like a hair off a jumper or something very fine, but it's in the atmosphere, the dust's in the atmosphere, so you must cover it to try and avoid any dust. Now, I did this, interestingly actually, on the day I sprayed the Brabham fan car, actually, I mentioned here, and I had this dust problem, but I actually sprayed this model at the same time because I knew we were going to be using the same TS8 Italian red. That's the right one, isn't it? I'm just doubting myself now. I'm pretty sure it was, but I know they did too. I'm pretty sure, yeah, because I've used some of it, you can tell. So we sprayed them both, and that's also another good trick, because you don't want to be keeping going back and spraying. If you can do a job lot, if you've got more than one kit that's going to use the same paint, do it a bit like a mass production run and do them all together in one go. Because at least then you're saving the trouble of having to, you know, I mean, I got spray on the floor and I had to clean the floor up, you know, with some solvent and stuff like that. But that worked pretty well, and actually the nap didn't really suffer as much as the Brabham fan car did. But there was a lot more of the Brabham fan car, and it's a more complicated shape, so I should have covered it and I didn't. I actually had them hanging on like little pegs off the side of my little desk here. Didn't really work. I wouldn't recommend that. So do like the guys like the Flory, Phil Flory's team do. They recommend, Matt Ball was talking about it a few weeks ago, and he recommended covering, so I definitely agree with him there. So that's another tip for you. Things that I use, apart from the rattle cans, we covered that really. The other thing is, when you finish with your rattle can, always tip it upside down and spray it out, because you should be able to get to a situation where then you run out, because it just stops you from having the problem of having some residue of spray in the tube, which might be a blodge that comes out next time you use it. So if you can, drain it off by just spraying it upside down. It should work. It doesn't always, it depends on how far to the bottom the little straw is, you know, the feeder tube inside. Some of them have a feeder tube, some don't. That's one of these didn't work, it wouldn't spray off, so I think it was maybe the primer, but I'm not sure. I think that one thing that we can say though, this is the reason I use rattle can more than most people do, and I was watching a demonstration of somebody doing some clear gloss coating, doing a beautiful job of it, superb, painting with an airbrush, And I just thought, I watched this a few weeks ago and I thought, I can't get that good. I'm not that good. So rattle-can can work for you, and it will give you, really quite a good gloss finish. So have a look at this Lotus here that we've got. This is the Lotus 79. And I think I got really a rather nice gloss with this. And this is basically straight from the rattle-can, to be honest. And it gives you, yes, a very acceptable level of gloss. Straight from the tin, really. So yeah, so don't be too frightened to use rattle-can. You've just got to control the environment in which you're going to spray it. And I think that's the biggest tip, is you must seal off the environment. It needs to be warm, it must be dust free if possible, or as dust free as you can make it. You don't want to be using extractors. Anything that pulls air is pulling dust. So that's a no-no. You just want a room that's just been left for a few hours with no dust in it, and therefore nothing's falling, the air's not been disturbed. And when you open the door, you need to open the door incredibly slowly, and you need to sort of creep around so you're not creating a vortex of dust behind you, because it will always bite you in the backside, and it'll get on the model. So frustrating when that happens. Anyway, there's a couple of tips. So that certainly was true of these. I'm just going to move my, I don't know if you've seen the gnat. This is from the Royal Air Force Red Arrows display team, aerobatics team from the 1970s, which is my personal favourite. They're still going today, of course. They use the Hawk now, but I personally like the gnat. I thought it was a very pretty aircraft, Now this is the Airfix kit, which is, not bad. It wasn't the best. One or two issues with it. I won't bore you with that now, but yeah, we got a good finish on it in the end. It wasn't perfect, but it's quite a nice shiny little gnat. And again, if I'd have been doing this with the airbrush, you've got to be absolutely on your A game with the airbrush, and you're going to have to put big dump of gloopy gloss coat down afterwards. I didn't do that with this. This is just straight from the rattle-can, and then it's had a bit of a wash over it, that's all. A very gentle one, and it's come out really rather good. So you can avoid steps by using the rattle-can. You've just got to get your conditions absolutely spot on to make it work. I'll now talk, I should actually also say another tip. I'm quite an impatient person, although you probably wouldn't think so, but I am. I get very frustrated when it's taking a long time, or if things go wrong and I have to go back, fix things. I absolutely hate that. I like to get it right first time. Another cheat that I did with the Mclaren, which will just bring more into the centre of the picture, and I'll zoom you in a bit. What I did with the Mclaren, you probably can't tell, but I cheated big time. I didn't paint the white, I just left it as the plastic. The plastic on this particular kit was so good and pretty much flawless. I just felt that, again, the more processors you add, the more risks you take, the more chances of things going wrong. And if you can escape, especially if you're new to the hobby or returning after many years, don't try and be, someone like Phil Flory or Spencer Pollard, these guys that are absolutely geniuses, and they've got years and years and years of experience. Don't set the bar too high. Try and get something that just works for you. And maybe each time you build a model, try something new, but don't try and do everything, because I promise you'll regret it. And I've actually kind of cheated my way to the top in terms of models. A few times I've got away with murder, really, and sometimes it just works. So we had to paint the paint here to make it look right. But do you know what? The eye, even I forget that I didn't paint the white. It's just au naturel white plastic. Not painted, but it has got a top coat, a clear coat over the top of the whole model. I needed to do that just to make sure the decals sat down properly, So it's probably got a little bit less glossy than it was before the clear coating, but it's less of two evils, and it worked out well. So again, I'm not recommending you do that, but think about it. If you look at some of these kits today, I've got really fine plastic, but if they've got, mottling or, blemishes within the plastic, you're going to probably have to paint it. But if it's as good as this, you just don't bother. Don't make life hard for yourself, try and keep it simple. So that was a bit naughty, really, wasn't it? And I did the same with the Ferrari, the Nigel Mansell Ferrari. It's not painted at all. Well, the wings are painted, the black bits, and all the detail stuff is painted. But the red, I took one look at it and thought, I'm going to mess this up. Now, probably today I could do a good job of it, I think. But at the time, it was 1991, I think I was building this. And I didn't bother, and you know, it looks fine. It looks fine. And I've recently renewed some of the decals on it, and it looks absolutely super. So don't try and climb Everest on your first walk, is what I'm trying to say, really. Now, let's talk about a few other things. Now, I've got, this is a nice one, isn't it? This is, some of you have seen this, some of you may not have done. I'm not normally into motorbikes, so this is a bit of an exception, but this is the Honda RC166 from Tamiya, and it's an absolute Bobby Dazzler, this one. It's got some really neat features. It's got a lot of the detail parts, I think they call it. So it's got working suspension, which I'm not going to demonstrate, so you know what will happen, I'll break it if I do. But it has got some interesting parts that work. It's got working suspension, it's got a working chain. I don't know if you can see that moving. Let's just zoom you in proper. Let's just give you an idea what it's like. See that? See the chain operating? It's a beauty, it really is. It's probably, in truth, it's probably one of my best ever results. Well, you may not agree, but I think it is. It's come out looking absolutely perfect, I think. I don't know what else I could do that would make it look any more realistic. I didn't want to heavily weather it anyway, but it's got the detail of genuine alloy wheels. Well, not alloy, but they're metal. True metal rims, true metal spokes, and it's got some astonishing details. It's got this incredible chain system, working chain, and it's got some superb details. Definitely a kit I would recommend. But it takes time, you know, and there's a lot of work has to go into these things to make them work, you know, to really get the result you need. It's tough. It's not going to be easy. And this one took me about 250 hours. Now when I say that, people think, what? No way, it doesn't take that long. I get mystified when I hear people talking about how long a kit takes to build, because they always seem to bandy around these numbers, and I think, well, they don't say that. It took me twice, 3 times as long as what you just said. But I include every minute, you know, from the minute I start. That includes cleaning the airbrush, which is one of the things I hate about the hobby the most, if I'm honest. I don't actually enjoy painting. I think I'm reasonably good at it. Not the best by any stretch of the imagination, but decent at it. But I don't enjoy it. I hate it, if I'm honest. And I have to clean this. I believe in having a clean airbrush. Now this one I'm using is the Iwata HP CH, which is a beautiful piece of equipment, I can tell you. Now this is, how old is this? This is 12 years old. It's the only airbrush I own. I don't use anything else, just this. And it's got a dent in it when I dropped it, and the colour cup got a little ding in the front, so the cap doesn't work anymore, but I never used it anyway. But I clean this every single time I use it. I think it's a terrible mistake to have airbrushes and not keep it clean. Why would you, you know, it's like having a dinner plate or a coffee cup. You wouldn't use a dirty dinner plate or a dirty coffee cup, because you're going to pick up, well, you might pick up some disease, you know, but you're going to pick up the remnants of what was in it before. You don't want that. You know, you're spraying things that you've spent hundreds of hours on. We don't want any rubbish going in there. So I clean that, I strip it down and clean it every single time it's used. Not just every day, but every time, every colour. I pretty much strip it apart, whip the needle out, clean it all down, and it's absolutely, I don't know if you can see in here, it's absolutely mint pretty much inside. Let's see if I can zoom you right in. And we get that. How's that? Now then. There we are. It's clean as a whistle. Okay. So I think that's another good tip. Is it's like, I always joke, is it Full Metal Jacket, or was it, what was the other film? Platoon, I can't remember now. The Vietnam War film where they say, this is my rifle, this is my gun. This is the only one. And it's like, you've got to look after this because this is your life. Quote from Star Wars there. This weapon is your life. You must look after it. And you should, because this is the number one most important piece of equipment if you're airbrushing, is the airbrush itself. You need to keep that clean. The cleaner it is, especially when you're using a high quality one like this. You know, this is a sort of it's almost like the sort of Porsche or Audi of the airbrush world. It's a really pristine, you know, premium product. Or they would say Lexus, wouldn't they, I suppose, being Japanese. But it's a very important bit of kit, and you've got to have it working efficiently at its best performance. You need to keep it clean. Now, I'll talk about that a bit more. We'll just move that lovely motorbike out of the way. It is gorgeous, isn't it? Did have one or two issues with the actual paint job, I can tell you. Not the red. It was actually the silver, which was also rattle-can, was it? Or was that... No, it wasn't rattle-can. Was it? Actually, I can't remember now. No, I think that was airbrushed on. I think it was alclad, in fact. But I just got a blodge on it, and then I tried to rub it off, and I made a bit of a mess. So I had to partially respray it, but you would never know today. You'd never know today. I mean, it does look, doesn't it? Quite nice. Sorry, I'm bigging up my own model here. But it's a classic example. This kit needed to have a perfect gloss finish, you know. And we really wanted to get it just right. So, yeah, it came out really, really nice. So it takes time though. It takes time, and that is probably I think it's my third longest ever build at 250 hours. Only beaten by the Mustang, which is the longest at 320. I know people don't believe me, but that's how long I spent on that Mustang, because I know at the time. 320 hours. But it's got a lot of gun bays and bullets to paint and lots of internal detail and stuff like that. This is all to do with the chain and the painting the engine and building the spokes. It's such fine work as well. Another thing you need, another good tip, even if you don't wear glasses, consider getting yourself some magnifying glasses, even if you're not a spectacle wearer. And when I say magnifying glasses, I don't mean the oh, I don't know, I've put mine there. It's disappeared. The big magnifiers that we all use, they've completely vanished. What on earth I've done with it? Anyway, I don't mean the big ones. I mean actually getting some like jeweller's glasses, just to give you magnification for fine work. And then when you use the big magnifiers you put over your head, that really brings it super close. It really helps you, really does. I can't speak highly enough. I don't know where I put mine now. I use the Optivisor ones actually, but I have lots of specific spectacles. Now obviously I'm a glasses wearer now, but I've got a couple of pairs of glasses I use just for modelling. You can probably tell they're quite thick. That basically gives me a zoom before we even get to the Optivisor, and you can't have too much magnification. So I'd certainly recommend that, and that could help you a lot. And if you need spectacles, then again consider what I did and get some that are corrective glasses that are also. I always say to the optician, I'm not reading here. I'm working here. I'm at half reading length, so it's close, And they came up with a formula that works really well for me. I mean, I couldn't have built this motorbike without those sort of glasses, because it's just like jewellery. It's so fine. It's so fine. Right down to the little tyre valve and things like that. Anyway, I'll put that aside so we don't bash it. And I'll talk about some of the materials I'm using. Again, not recommending any of these. I'm just saying this is what I use and I find this result. So, we talked about the airbrush. I recommend, there's lots of good airbrushes. There's Procon and there's Harder and Steenbeck, and I mean I shouldn't name them because there's so many really, but Awata is my personal favourite. But many others are available, and good ones. When I'm cleaning the airbrush, some people are going to get nervous when I tell them this now. I use quite a strong solvent, and it's the Revel Painter Clean, which is really intended for cleaning. It's a brush cleaner actually. Now this is quite tricky to get hold of in some territories, including the UK at the moment. I'm buying this from somebody on eBay, and I think he brings it in from Germany. But this stuff is to be treated with great respect. It's a very powerful solvent, and it absolutely stinks. It reeks, and it's a very sweet, acrid, sickly smell. And I just want to read you some of the details of what it says on the information leaflet that comes on it, just as a word of warning. Keep away from heat, sparks, open flames or hot surfaces. No smoking. This is extremely flammable, yeah. Use only in a well ventilated area. Do not ingest. Avoid contact with the eyes or skin. If swallowed, contact the poison centre, physician or emergency room immediately. Keep out of the reach of children under 14. Or should that be under 40? It says potential adverse health effects include, if you inhale the vapours, it may cause problems to your central nervous system. Direct eye contact will cause irritation to the eyes and dryness to the skin due to defatting. So this basically just immediately removes any oils in your skin. I can speak from experience. Your skin goes white. It's really nasty stuff, you know. And then people say, why do you wear gloves? Sorry, it's alright, it's just my lead for the computer. Why do you wear gloves? Listen, that's my other biggest tip of all, which I almost forgot. These things, I don't understand anybody who models using things like any of these chemicals and doesn't wear gloves, because I've learned over the years it doesn't do you any good. It doesn't do you any good. Well, this is what they're saying, of course. And it goes on to say, first, after inhalation, remove the person to the fresh air. If needed, provide artificial respiration. And then it goes on, consult a doctor, you know, wash off the skin immediately with soap and water, go to your local poison centre. Do not induce vomiting, because that makes things worse, obviously. Highly flammable liquid and vapour causes serious eye irritation. May cause drowsiness and dizziness if inhaled. Keep out of the reach of children. If medical advice is needed, have the product container or label to hand. My God. I actually had some problems. I'm an asthma sufferer, which some of you may notice. On the desk there's an inhaler. And I think when I was building the Mustang, I think I just got too much of this. I wasn't having the door open often enough, or the window. And as it says, the vapours are not very good, and I started to have real problems with my chest. And I had to go to the doctor, and I told him what it was, and he said, if you have to use this stuff, well ventilated, he said, isn't enough. He said, get a mask. So that's the other tip. I don't know what I've done with mine, but I have a respirator mask. And when you're using anything that's airborne, rattle-can included, you know, and a lot of these products, you know, here's another one, another two here that are good products, but not the safest in the world, I don't think. Yeah, Mr. Colour Rapid Thinner, which is a very effective product indeed. Excellent thinner. Also helps you with things like getting a nice flat finish when you want a flat finish on like armour, or if you're putting down primers, which we'll talk about in a minute. Very good for that. Here we have Mr. Levelling, self-levelling thinner, we call it, SLT, they call it mystical levelling thinner. Another good product. This is gives more of a gloss effect than this tends to do. But they're both a bit nasty, you know. You don't want to be spraying this stuff indoors unless you've got an extractor or you've got a big door open or lots of ventilation. Get a through draft. This is the one time, don't worry about the dust when you're spraying this stuff. You want air moving, okay? They're quite nasty and they can damage your health, so you've got to be careful with them, okay? A couple of other things that I've got. I'm going to talk about primers next because that's a natural follow from what we just said. Like a lot of people, I change around. I don't use primer all the time. In fact, if I'm honest with you, I think every single model in front of me has not been primed. I think that when you're on this type of models that are very high gloss finishes, don't think you need it really. I don't think you need a primer. I'm not convinced at all. They're all fine, you know, I didn't have any issues with them at all. They're all lovely and glossy. I think primers are more important when you're doing a lot of processes like weathering. And none of these are weathered. Basically that sort of tells you all you need to know. But if you're doing armour, if you're doing aircraft, then priming is more important because you need the paint to to really bite into the plastic surface. So you're going to need some primer of some description. So we've got here, I've got a couple of rattle-can ones, Mr. Surfacer, and the Tamiya primer, which I didn't bring out, but that's a very good product. They do a grey and they do white. Excellent. Get the fine I think they call it. I found that was the best for me. And you can get it, I say, white or grey, and they spell grey the American way, G-R-A-Y, for some reason. I guess that's just a cultural thing. But anyway, if you're going to use your airbrush, try this Mr. Surfacer. This 1500 white I find is very good because it's nice and fine. That's a real good one. And if you feel you need a grey, then they do, I think I've got a 1200 somewhere, and here we've got a 1000. And again, obviously that's just a little bit more, it's a little bit less fine, a little bit coarser, but still good products. But again, these are very, very stinky products. So what I just said a few moments ago about breathing in, inhalation and ventilation, it's even more important. They're just important with these because they all smell very similar. They're like a lacquer, aren't they, basically? You know. On the next one in the line, of course, would be gloss coat. What clear coat do you use? Well, I've used clear, and I've used these two products. This is one that a lot of you probably haven't used, which I've had a go at, and I found was very good. I don't think it needs to be thinned, and if you do thin it, don't go mad. But this is Deluxe Materials, who I'm a great fan of actually as a company. They have got some nice products. We'll come to another one of theirs in a minute. But this looks like glass. Is really it's a dipping solution for your canopies, but it's also a very nice clear coat which you can spray with your airbrush. And it says for realistic glass-like finishes on clear plastics, and it shows a picture of a canopy that's been dipped. And I've dipped some of mine. It's been very, very good indeed. If you want a super glossy canopy, and if you are struggling, you know, perhaps you've got a canopy that's got maybe some fine scratches, or this is very good for getting rid of things like that. If you dip it, you can end up with a much nicer looking canopy. You just dip it in there for a minute or two, and then put it on some paper to dry off. Again, cover it though. You don't want any dust getting on it, so cover it, put a cup over it or something, and just wedge it up so that some air can get in underneath. Leave that for an hour or two, and you'll have a beautiful, super clear canopy, you know. And you can use it on these frosted effect, like, you know, some of the kits like Tamiya do some frosted panels. Very good for that actually. So that's another good product. Recommend that one. It's something that nobody else seems to talk about. The other clear coat that everybody knows about, I think it's very popular at the moment, is this one, which I've also had some good results recently with, and that's the Mr. Colour GX 100, we call it. It's a good product, that one you thin. I think we're talking. Well, I asked Phil Flory about this, and he helped me out a bit because he said that I wasn't thinning it enough, and I told him what I was doing. And I think he said 70% thinner is a good mix for this stuff, and it needs to go on there nice and thin. And what you do is you go low pressure, and you go in close, and that seems to give you much better dump of it, you know. So it needs to be very. Use the self-leveling thinner with it. This one, they go together very well, and mix it in that ratio 70-30, and you probably get quite good results. And I certainly got better results when I took that advice, so that was very helpful. So thanks, Bill. And then really just a couple of other products which other people don't seem to mention or use. I'm sure some of you do, but the first one is, they're both from Deluxe Materials. First one is a brush cleaner. Now I've been using this paint to clean stuff, which is a bit of overkill really, and it really is. I end up with it, you know, smelling, everywhere smells of it, and I wanted to get away and get something that was a bit gentler, and this is just as effective but much gentler as a chemical. So this is Brush Magic from Deluxe Materials. Quite like this. It seems to work well. You can use it in your airbrush as well. As you can see, it's got the airbrush pictured here, and that seems to go very well. It's water soluble, so it's low odour, and it's safer for the health and environment, and I do recommend that. I'm quite impressed with it. I'm using it all the time. I actually have it rather oddly, try not to laugh, I've actually got it in this container, which is normally for your Microsol. I'm using an old Microsol container just to be a bottle. It's very dirty, as you can see. Once changing, disgraceful. And the other product that they do, which I quite like, is glue and glaze, and this is for you gluing your canopies so that you don't get any glue marks. Obviously, if you use a normal liquid cement, it's a bit aggressive, and it runs everywhere because of capillary action, and it will fog the canopy, and that's what this avoids. So it's very like the micro scale industries product as well. What do they call those? It's got a name, hasn't it? You know the one I mean. It comes in a bottle just like that, actually, doesn't it? Anyway, glue and glaze is a British product. So if you're in the States, I don't know if it's available there, but I'm sure you can probably get it. But very, very good. It dries clear, so you avoid this problem of having visible damage to the canopy. You don't get any visible glue left. Basically a PVA glue, but it's a very fine one. I really like that. It works very well for me, and it's just served me very well. And when you saw my Messerschmitt 109 and things like that, and the Spitfire, all been glued with this. So if you're impressed by the way the canopies look, then that's the reason rather than me, probably. Very good. Now the other thing, of course, I should say, most of the paints I use actually are Tamiya Acrylics. Everybody's recommending going to lacquers. I'm a bit resistant, not because I don't think that they're right and they're better products, but because of the smell, and again this issue I have. What none of you know is that the basic problem I have is I'm not spraying here. I don't do any spraying here. I do hand painting here, but actually I haven't got an extractor system. I've actually had one, but it's not practical where I live, so it just doesn't work. I haven't got a window handy here. There are issues with it, so I actually spray. This is going to make people laugh. They're going to say, now we know why he doesn't do build videos. I actually spray in the kitchen with the kitchen door open. So that's where my spraying is done. And when I'm using rattle-can, it's either outside, but for dust reasons I don't really recommend that. Or as I say, I'll turn one of the rooms here, or the utility room will become a bit of a spray booth or lab for a few hours. But most of what I use is Tamiya acrylic, and therefore, there's gazillions of them. I've got some of them here that I've been using. Some XF61 dark green, rubber black, use that for lots of things, the rubber black. I mean, they're just brilliant, aren't they? The only thing I hate about these is the fact that they went from the bigger bottles to this little tiny bottle now. What is it? 10 mils. It used to be 20 mils. There was a much bigger bottle. I've still got one or two of them around somewhere. And these just don't last long enough, I'd rather pay probably rather pay double and have the bigger bottle, because you don't have to go as often to replace it. But anyway, so my staple is Tamiya acrylics, and I must have 200 or 300 of these. But I don't have it on racks. I have them in little plastic tubs. And of course that means I use the Tamiya X20A, and I've got the proper bottles of it in the other room, but I decant it into these little ones, droppers, so I can apply it nice and easy, And then finally, what else can I think of? I do use enamels. I'm using the Tamiya enamels. I was trying Humbrol, but the Humbrols in the tinlets are not nice. Everybody moans about them, don't they? They're obviously a UK product, and I'd like to use them, but I just don't think they're great, So I just have a very limited range. I've got, 5 or 6 here? 5. So I'm using, really, for the metallics, and it works very, very well on things like, instrumentation and doing fine detailing, things like the Spitfire or these racing cars. So I'm using the Tamiya XF16, flat aluminium. We've got the gold, chrome silver, and then we've got finally metallic grey. Whoops. Yeah, metallic grey and gunmetal. And I find that's all I need, those 5, to be quite honest. I am actually using, in conjunction with those products, I am using the Humbrol enamel thinner. I know it's not great. It's not great. So do not follow that recommendation. Once that's gone, I'm going to be getting some decent stuff, I think. maybe even the Tamiya own. But I think I will try these Tamiya lacquers because everybody speaks so highly of them, and I think that when you're trying to, if you're trying to make the jump, there's a huge gulf, isn't there, between rattle-can and acrylic in terms of the actual effect you're going to achieve. Acrylic in an airbrush, you're not going to get that high gloss finish, are you? Rattle-can will, but this is why people say go to lacquers, because they are going to give you a much higher finish, because it eats itself. As you put the layers down, it keeps on sort of re-smoothing up, and I think that does sound quite attractive, so I'm going to give it a go. Anyway, that's really it for today. I just wanted to talk. Again, I'm not recommending you do any of these products or you rush out and buy them. Don't do that. But just have a think about what I've said, and if you're having problems, you may find some of these different ideas of what I've done might help you. Or if you've got any recommendations on any of these products that you'd like to share, then put it in the comments underneath. I'll be very interested to hear it. Actually, I'm sure everybody would, because this is not it's not an exact science modelling. It's a lot of chemicals, and it depends on so many factors: how you're using them, when you're using them, how warm it is, what's your air temperature, what's your altitude, what's your pressure in the weather, and all things like that. I always find that spraying gloss finishes, especially with rattle-can, it's always better when the weather is drier, higher pressure. Doesn't go down well. It always goes down gloopy, I think, when it's rather cold or wet. So again, there's so many factors that can interact with it, and this is why we all can learn from each other. So please don't sound like I'm preaching at all. I'm not an expert in these areas, but they've worked well for me. You can see that some of the results I've got here have been quite decent, if not perfect, but they're not perfect, but close enough, good enough for what I was trying to achieve, and been very happy with them really. So yeah, have a think about it, and if you've got any recommendations or you want to know where to get any of these things, just give me a shout. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you've found it interesting and not teaching somebody, we say teaching granny to suck eggs, so teaching you something you already know. You probably do know a lot of this, but just sharing my own experiences with you really. I'm always very open to listening to new techniques, new materials, but I think you've got to be careful not to keep chopping and changing, because I think once you find which is what I've done, find a system that kind of works for you, the way you use these products, and if it's working, don't fix it if it isn't broken. Just keep using your own technique that works for you, and see how you get on. But just keep an open mind to new products and new ideas, because that's what I do. I'm constantly. The GX100, where I don't know where I put it now. Where is it? It's hiding somewhere. I've only recently. Where have I put it? There it is. I've only started using that in the last 3-4 months, and I think it may have been Florey's team that recommended it, and it does work quite well, So always be open to new ideas, but don't feel you've got to rush out and just change everything. If it's working, leave it alone. But if it's not working, try some of these others. And that's what I do. I try the things that people find works for them. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me. I hope you'll give us a thumbs up if you thought it was interesting or useful, any of it. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do so. And I will hope to be back in the not too distant future. In the meantime, don't forget to ring the notification bell so you get alerted when the next video comes up. And it just remains for me to say to you, happy modelling, and thanks for joining me. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.